I want you to think about the worst thing you've ever done, the moment you're most ashamed of, the mistake that made you feel like you were too far gone, too broken, too much of a failure for God to ever use again. There's a man in the Bible who did something so devastating, so public, so unforgivable, that he literally went back to his old life and walked away from everything. And what Jesus did next changed the course of human history. By the end of this video, I promise you, you're going to see yourself in this story. His name was Simon, just a fisherman, rough hands, weathered skin, working class guy from Galilee. Not a scholar, not a priest, not someone with a polished resume. And then one day, a rabbi named Jesus walked up to him on the shore, right in the middle of a normal Tuesday, and said two words, "Follow me." And Simon dropped his nets. Just like that. Here's what I want you to notice, because this is where your story and Peter's story begin to overlap. Maybe you also had a moment where something changed. A sermon, a hard season, a quiet night when you felt something pulling at you. You stepped toward faith. That's Simon. That's where he starts. Jesus even gives him a new name, Peter, which means the rock. Think about that. Jesus looks at this impulsive, loud, sometimes reckless fisherman and says, "You're going to be my foundation." And Peter believed it. For 3 years, Peter was there for everything. He watched Jesus heal the blind. He watched him feed 5,000 people with a child's lunchbox. He was in the room when Jesus raised a 12-year-old girl from the dead. And then came the moment that defines Peter's faith at its peak. It's the middle of the night. The disciples are in a boat, storm raging, waves crashing, and they see a figure walking on the water toward them. Peter, impulsive, bold Peter, says something nobody else even dares to think. "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus says, "Come." Peter gets out of the boat, and for one impossible moment, he walks on water. Maybe you know that feeling, that moment in your faith journey when everything felt electric, when you felt close to God, when you were doing the thing everyone said was impossible. That's Peter on the water. But then he looks down at the waves. Fast forward to the night before Jesus is crucified. They're in the upper room. Jesus looks at Peter and says something that had to have felt like a gut punch. "Before the rooster crows tonight, you will deny me 3 times. Peter pushes back hard. "Even if everyone else falls away, I never will. I will go to prison with you. I will die with you." He meant it. He absolutely meant it. But a few hours later, Jesus is arrested. The crowd is angry. The situation is dangerous. And a servant girl, not a soldier, not a government official, a servant girl points at Peter and says, "Hey, weren't you with him?" And Peter says, "I don't know what you're talking about." Then again, and then a third time, "I don't know the man." And at that exact moment, a rooster crows. And Luke 22:61 tells us something that will break your heart if you let it. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. And Peter went outside and wept bitterly. If you've ever felt like a failure, if you've ever done something you swore you'd never do, if you've ever looked yourself in the mirror and thought, "I can't come back from this," you know what Peter felt in that moment. The shame, the disbelief, the way you replay it over and over, the way you wonder if you've ruined everything. This is where so many people walk away, not from Peter's story, from their own. Jesus is crucified. He's dead. And Peter shuts down. John 21 tells us exactly what Peter does. After the resurrection, after he's already heard the news that Jesus is alive, he says 3 words, "I'm going fishing." He went back to the boat, back to the nets, back to who he was before any of this started, Because when you've failed that badly, even when the miracle is right in front of you, shame has a way of making you feel like you disqualified yourself. The resurrection is real, but it's not for me. I'm the one who denied him. Maybe the best I can do is stay out of the way. Does that sound familiar? Maybe you've gone back to the old habits, the old version of yourself that felt safer than the person God was calling you to be, because failure does that. But Jesus doesn't leave him there. The disciples have been fishing all night and caught nothing, and a figure on the shore calls out, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat." They do it. Suddenly the net is so full they can't haul it in. And John, always the perceptive one, whispers, "It's the Lord." And Peter, a broken ashamed, doesn't hesitate for 1 second. He jumps in the water and swims to shore. Jesus has already built a fire, cooking breakfast, waiting. And then comes the most beautiful conversation in the entire New Testament. 3 times, Jesus asks Peter the same question. "Peter, do you love me?" 3 times. One for every denial. Not, "Why did you do it?" Not, "Do you know how much you hurt me?" Not, "You're going to have to earn this back." Just, "Do you love me?" And every time Peter says yes, Jesus responds with a commission, not a punishment. "Feed my sheep." Jesus doesn't disqualify Peter. He doesn't replace him. He restores him completely. The man who denied Jesus 3 times becomes the man who preaches on the day of Pentecost, and 3,000 people give their lives to God in a single day. The man who ran away becomes the man who stands up in front of the rulers who crucified Jesus and says, "We cannot stop speaking about what we have seen and heard." The greatest failure of the early church becomes its greatest voice. So let me ask you something. What did you do that made you feel like God was done with you? What failure made you go back to the boat? Because here's what the story of Peter proves. Your worst moment is not your last chapter. The Bible is full of people who should have been disqualified. Moses committed murder and spent 40 years in the wilderness. David committed adultery and covered it up with more sin. Paul, before he was Paul, was rounding up Christians to have them executed. And God used every single one of them, not despite their failures, sometimes through them. Because here's the thing about Peter that nobody talks about. He couldn't have preached with that kind of power if he hadn't first been broken by his own failure. When Peter stood up and told people that grace was real, that God could restore what was destroyed, he wasn't just reciting theology. He was a living testimony. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Not the people who have it all together, the brokenhearted, the crushed ones. Isaiah 43:18-19 says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" God is not asking you to forget what happened. He's asking you to stop letting it be the only thing that defines you. When you feel like a failure, and you will, because we all do, come back to the beach. There is a fire already burning. There is already a meal being prepared, and the one who has every reason to be done with you is asking the only question that matters. Do you love me? That worst thing you've ever done, the moment you're most ashamed of. That thing does not disqualify you. It might actually be the very thing God uses to reach someone who needs to hear exactly what you've been through. Peter's denial became his ministry. Your failure can become your message. If this hit you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me, what part of Peter's story resonated most with you? And if you're going through a hard season right now, if you're sitting in that boat feeling like you've already disqualified yourself, I made this video for you. God's not done, not even close. I'll see you in the next one.